like everybody that wants food and drinks has food and drinks. Yep, everybody good and settled? Sweet. I think we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lydia. I'm one of the Ember developers over at the front side. Brandon is your normally regular scheduled MC. He's out celebrating his kiddo's birthday tonight, so I'm covering for him. This is our last meetup of 2015. We meet every third Thursday. So we're going to run into Thanksgiving holiday and Christmas holiday coming up for the next 2 months. So we will meet back in January. And let's see. We usually like to do a little intro of everybody. We have a lot of people here tonight, so I thought I might try something a little bit different and try something a little bit interactive. So if this is your very first Ember meetup, raise your hand. A lot of first timers, excellent, welcome, we're glad you came. Raise your hand if somebody pays you to write Ember code. Excellent. Yeah. Raise your hand if Ember is a hobby that you're exploring and want to learn more about it. Awesome. Very welcome. All right. Let's see. Raise your hand if you've worked in Ember for 0 to 1 years. A lot of people. Pretty common. How about 1 to 2 years? Fewer? Kind of? I don't know. Think about it. 2 to 3? Anyone 3 plus? Wow.
It's only been around 3.5.
Right. Pretty impressive if we had some early adopters, but Sam was early on that.
April 2011.
Awesome. All right. Raise your hand if you were hiring Ember devs. Everybody look around. Raise your hand if you were looking for an Ember job. All right. Looks like you're going to have plenty to pick from. Do the rounds tonight. Awesome. And finally, raise your hand if you work in this building somewhere. All right. Spiceworks is an awesome sponsor for us. They're obviously volunteering their space and also covered the catering for tonight. So be sure and shake some hands and thank them for sponsoring tonight. I'll give maybe Chris or someone, if anybody wants to come up and talk from Spiceworks in a couple minutes, we can go through that. We've got 2 presenters tonight. We've got Charles Lowell from the front side, and he's going to be demoing some cool open source stuff that we've been working on. And then we also brought out Rob Jackson from Rhode Island, and he's going to be talking about pods. So you're honorary October pod person, I guess. Sweet. Alrighty. Then yeah, does anyone from Spiceworks want to come up and? Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Sweet. Then Charles, are you good to go?
I'm good to go.
Excellent.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sure.
So you're supposed to use both of these guys.
What's that?
This is for the camera.
Okay.
And you can handhold this, but I'm guessing you'll want this one.
Wait, so this is for the camera.
Mm-hmm. And this is for the piece.
So, okay, we'll put one on this side. One on this side. And one on this side.
And Brandon asked me to check and make sure that you're recording.
Okay. I'm recording with QuickTime?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is
screen. So,
recording the screen with QuickTime.
yeah.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? No? Is the mic on? No?
Like closer? Yeah, it's gotta go higher on the collar.
Okay. Is that better? Yeah? Okay, I should probably move this one up a little bit closer. And maybe turn it around so that it's, there we go. Okay. and then I'll try not to, remind me not to gesticulate wildly or get excited and run around. Okay, so I don't think, we're actually not going to be doing much from the command line. But tonight we're actually going to get a twofer. I'm going to do 2 quick lightning talks about some technology that we've been doing. The first one is going to be a little bit meta, so we'll go meta first. And that is on a software package called Ember Presents. So what is Ember Presents? Ember Presents is a slide deck application built in Ember. As you can see, it's pretty advanced. There are already a lot of slide deck applications out there. There's Keynote, there's Reveal, there's Deck.js. So is this a good idea to do one in Ember? And the answer, of course, is yes. This is a fantastic idea. But why? Why when we have so many options? And I think the answer is because more and more when you have interactive presentations, the presentations themselves are software. And so you need a robust framework to help you maintain that software. Something that gives you modularity so that you can easily include things like animations and code snippet components, or really anything that's out there in the Ember ecosystem. And already Ember CLI enables a vast interconnected ecosystem, and why not have that for presentation software? So that's the little pitch for that. And the presentation that you're about to see is actually written using Ember Presents. So I should put a URL. It's if you go to github/the/Ember-presents. Oh, it's on cowboyd/Ember Presents. So that is that one. First lightning talk. Thank you. And the second lightning talk is going to be about, let's see. Is this it? Yeah. Do I need to kill off that other server? Yeah. Working with and rendering big data sets in your application. So let's talk about your app. You're working with Ember. Your app is absolutely fantastic. You've got real muscle, real power in your corner when the Tomster's on your side. But eventually, it seems like this always happens to me, you get to a point where someone's like, oh, man, can you guys implement scrolling? We've got this long data set, and it's too big to bring onto the screen all at once. And it's at this point that you're like, oh my God. And you know, we've all done it. It's just a lot of work. I mean, the first thing you do is you go out and you download 8 crappy jQuery plugins to see if they'll do what you do, and you're like, oh, this one works. No, it doesn't. Oh no, that's terrible. And then you start rolling your own, and then you say, oh, okay, well, I've got it going. Oh no, the requests are coming back in a different order that I fired them, and I've got too much data. I need to start unloading records. And can I start at the end of the list and go backwards? And it turns out there's a lot of edge cases around infinite scrolling that just make this a huge, huge pain in the ass. And so every single time that you come to this portion of your application, it's like at this point that I just want to take a nap. It makes me feel tired. It makes me feel exhausted just even thinking about it. But what if I told you that there was an easier way, that you could get back that easy and breezy feeling? You might say that I'm selling something, and I am. But what you really want to do is you want to just focus on the part of getting the records from your server. You want to say, okay, what is it to fetch one page of records, and then let something else handle when to call it. And that's what we developed Ember impagination for. This is something that will know when to load the pages, how many to load, and where to load them, and if it's a requirement of yours to save memory, when to unload the records, all while providing a seamless experience to your users. So let's actually see a demo in action. This is my favorite thing about giving a lightning talk, is we don't have to we can just wave hands and not actually talk about how it works, but we can actually just jump right into the code. So we're going to have a theoretical color server where we can get a page of colors that represents the whole spectrum. So this is basically what the payload looks like. So it's just a GET request. We're going to give it a page number, a page size, and it's going to give us a list of colors in return. And the way that we drop this into our application is we just have a single component. Now this is a data component. It's not, the only purpose of it is to inject a value into your templating scope. But you can see I pass a fetch function to the component and it yields an array. And that's it. It's just an Ember array. But behind the scenes, it's actually going to be loading and unloading records for you seamlessly. It works really well with Ember Collection. So this is the basic integration with Ember Collection. You don't have to use Ember Collection if you don't want to. You can use your own component that only renders a subsection. But again, the data set is there just to provide the data. So this is it in action, and we're going to be loading colors from the server. This is just a list of colors. It goes across the entire spectrum, so it starts in red, ends up in violet, and passes through blue, green, and all that stuff in between. And you can see each item in the list represents a single color. And the numbers there represent the page and record number. So the first color is on page 0, record 0. The second color is on page 0, record 1. The third one is on page 0, record 2, and so on and so forth. And as we scroll, you can see we're going, and this is actually fetching in batches of 10, it's fetching these colors from the server. And so you can see you've got the scroll bar on the right that shows exactly where you are in the data set. And we end up down in the deep blue sea over here. So that's pretty cool. How exactly does this work? Well, the data set has the concept of a load horizon. And the load horizon is, will provide, the component will provide a default for you. If you don't, I believe the default is 2, but you can make it 2 pages, you can make it 3 pages, you can make it 100 pages. And so any record inside that load horizon will be fetched. And so we can see a visualization of this happening. This is the same component that we were just looking at, but we have a representation of the actual data set. And now, let me unpack this for you a little bit. The magenta line, that represents where we are in the current iteration. So we're at offset 0, okay, on page 0 on the list. That corresponds to this element right here. That yellow line is the load horizon. And so what this is saying is, if a page falls within the load horizon, then we need to request it. Anything that's outside of the load horizon does not need to be. So all of the rest of the pages are black. Pages 2 through 29 they're not on the screen and they're not on our server. And so with the load horizon of 2, you can see as I begin to scroll forward, the magenta line, which is our current read offset, is now in front of page 1. The yellow line, and so all of the pages between that magenta offset and the yellow line are now loaded. And we can continue on the data set. Now I've introduced a delay here. So I've made the color server take like 1 second to return so you can see the latency. And when the pages are not currently loaded, they're white along there. And so you can see our two yellow lines up there represent the load horizon. If I'm to scroll backwards, I don't need to request any records because those records are already there. But then as I scroll through the whole list, I can get through. You can see the pages getting requested as they go. And that's really cool, but sometimes you're working with really, really huge data sets and you can't hold all those records in memory. So that one, it never unloaded. Once it requested a page and the page was loaded, it kept it in memory. But if you're dealing with either really huge, gnarly objects or just a whole lot of them, then you're going to want to maybe unload it. And so you can do that by setting the unload horizon. And so here we're setting the unload horizon to 6. And what that means is that any record or any page that falls outside the load horizon will be discarded. It'll be thrown away and won't be referenced anymore. So here's an example. Now we have the magenta, which is our read offset, like that's where we are in the iteration. The yellow is the load horizon, and then you can see this new white line right here. That's the unload horizon. Anything falling outside of there will be unloaded. Now, of course, these are unrequested as of yet. So as we scroll through, you can see that unload horizon moving forward, but it's always moving forward through unrequested pages. But then after we get the magenta line 6 pages back, everything back beyond 6 pages is now discarded from memory. And so those colors are gone. They're not even in memory, even though we're scrolled way down into the list. So that's it. You can find the code for this talk up here, and I need a line break in between those links. That's actually 2 links. One is for the Ember impagination library, and one is for this talk right here. But I wrote this about 30 seconds before I was standing here. So anyway, that's it. That's all I got. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions for him?
How does it determine what a page of data is? Is it dependent on the display, or are you in some way saying this number of records?
So you actually configure that on the component itself. You say what your page size want it to be. It defaults to 10. And then it will actually pass that value to your fetch function. So your fetch function has 2 mandatory parameters, the page offset and the page size. And so then it's responsible for taking those values, getting the page at that page offset and of that size. So yeah, that's driven by the fetch function that you pass in.
What inspired you to make this? Like, did you have a project in particular that?
Actually, it's funny you should say that. This actually grew out of the work on a couple different projects, but most recently it was for the ticket grid for the hosted help desk. The data portion that drives that, when we were looking to extract that so that we could use it on the hosted help desk and on the desktop help desk, we wanted to have a uniform way of loading the data, irregardless of the server interface and the user interface. So this was very, very highly inspired by those 2 projects.
I have a question. How tightly is the unloading to Ember data? Is it just a callback, an action that you unload? Is it?
That's a great question.
The fetching is
That's actually a great question. So the question is, how does the unloading work with Ember data? And the answer is, you got me on that. We don't have currently a hook right now. It discards it from memory, but it's not aware that there might be other objects that hold on to that record, like the Ember data store.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is just have a hook that you can do
Similar
that's
to
like,
fetch, only
yeah, exactly. So unfetch or unload. Yeah. so to do the teardown, and then at that point you could unload them from your Ember data store.
Gotcha.
Is this Ember only?
So the question is this Ember only? And the answer is actually no. We developed Ember impagination as a standalone JavaScript library called impagination, and we plan on making it available as a separate JavaScript-only library. So you could use this from jQuery, you could use it in React, Angular, what have you. Yeah, it's. I don't even. You could even use it in Node if you wanted to. There's no dependency on anything.
What were the really challenging edge cases that you had to deal with? What were some of the bigger?
So boy, so the question is, what were the really challenging edge cases? There were a lot of them. I'd say handling the case. So this handles the case where you know the extent of your data set. So if you notice, one of the things in that scroll is the scroll bar was actually positioned at the proper place of where you were in the data set. And that information is only available on the server. So it has to handle two cases. One where the server actually reports, hey, by the way, there are a total of this many records in the data set. And then the other case is where that information is not available. Like it's a truly infinite data set, and you just have to basically allocate those pages as the load horizon pushes forward. And then, of course, you have to handle cases where you're starting at the end of the data set, you're starting at the beginning of the set, where the load horizon or the unload horizon might extend off beyond the end, and when you have mismatches between those, and yeah. Lydia and Alex worked a lot on this, and yeah, they did a very thorough job, but there were a lot of edge cases, which is one of the reasons you want this in a library.
You mentioned in the beginning something about the order of the records.
Yes.
This
solves, yeah, so the question is does this solve the order of records being, the order in which you request the pages being different from the order in which those requests come back, they resolve? Is that the question?
Well, I was thinking more in terms of like on Twitter.
Uh-huh.
The beginning of your list, if you scroll up again, then you're gonna have a new zeros page.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah, I think it would probably handle that.
Given the snippet you had, the find query would execute every time, assuming you didn't
Yeah.
have it purely infinite. So it would unload it and then you'd fetch it
Yeah.
again, because the find with a query param would always hit.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and in that case it might even,
if it
yeah.
doesn't unload horizon, then it would not do that.
It would not, you're right. It would not. So in that case, you might want to pin the load horizon and the unload horizon to be the same value, and then you would be navigating across the data set like that, so that as soon as it was off screen, it was gone, and if you moved back on screen, it would refetch that record. So that would be one way to stay fresh.
How does it work on mobile?
Well, this component that I demoed, so the question is how does it work on mobile? So this component that I demoed here actually has no UI whatsoever. It's a component in the kind of strict sense of the word, but really its purpose is just to inject an interface to your data so that other visual components can use it. So the only thing that it actually yields is a thing that looks like an array. Now, under the covers, this array is doing all kinds of stuff to load and unload data as you access different indices on that array, but it has no visual style of its own. So that part is completely up to you. So that's the problem that it's trying to solve is just about the data.
Does that mean it's tagless, or does it actually have a tag of its own?
It does have a tag. It has both a tag and a JavaScript class that you can instantiate if you wanted to use it from a route or something like that. So you don't have to use the tag. The tag is more like a constructor. It's like the component is there just to construct the data set, and then anytime a new state of the data set is available, inject that state into your templating scope.
Is it compatible with 1x?
Of what?
Ember? the question is it compatible with 1x? And the answer is yes. This is compatible because there's no, now in this demo,
Collection.
this was using Ember Collection. Okay, so there's an important distinction here. We used Ember Collection to do this. You might want to use Ember List View pre-113. But this would work with both List View and 113.
Or neither, if you wanted static instead of like you wanted like
Yeah.
previous basically.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think I grabbed your beer, but it's
No, mine's full. Yes.
yes,
fine.
that's yours.
Don't take my beer.
It's bad tire.
Can't help we both have taste.
So we're gonna double mic you.
What does that mean?
So this one's
But I'm Rob.
for the camera.
So we can't wander around?
You can make these
That's
little.
fine. That's fine. I feel like a big shot now.
And then this one is actually for the PA.
This one is hot.
You may need to bring it kind of pretty close up to the top.
How's that? Seems good.
If you wouldn't mind, it would be awesome if we could record it on quick.
I will do it, yeah. I gotta get logged back in and stuff.
Would you like an intro or you want to intro yourself?
I don't care.
Okay.
I'm getting a quick time going.
I'm gonna let you run with it.
So really quick, I'm Chris. We're hiring for a bunch of different positions here at Spiceworks. Obviously, the interest here would probably be on the front end, but we're always hiring both front end and back end developers. We've got a bunch of projects using Ember, everything from SaaS products to locally installed applications to internal tools. Lots of things with big audiences and big data sets. So if you're interested, you can talk to me, or I can point you. We've got a bunch of the team leads for different groups here. And thanks for coming.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me firstly?
Yes.
Good. I have no problem getting louder. So, secondly, if there is no heckling in this talk, it has not been successful. Okay, so I'm going to talk, if you can't tell, I'm going to talk about pods. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, etc. First, a little bit about me. I'm an Ember core team member. I work at a company named Aptable. We make working on deploying and managing apps that require compliance with healthcare regulations and HIPAA and all that jazz. Very easy and straightforward. If any of you are interested in that or have apps that might apply to, come see me after. I'd love to talk. And I really, really have an open source problem. To the point where my wife went out and bought a brand new PlayStation 4 and said, no, you have to play this 1 hour a day. It's a good problem to have, but yeah. So I play Destiny, if anybody's wondering. So what's that? RWJ Blue 01. So I would not be able to be here or to do any of the things I do without my family. They are literally the foundation of everything, and I want to thank them. They can't be here, obviously, but it is great. My kids today actually got they're in karate. They got their yellow belts today, and I'm real proud of them. Okay, so what are pods? Firstly, before we not firstly, however many Lees I've done, how many of you all are using pods today? Like in an app, okay, kind of. Like you have a pod, one pod,
2 or 3.
2 pods,
No,
3
no,
pods, 4.
yeah.
Okay, so how many enjoy it? Okay, that's a decent number of the people that originally raised their hands. So I will say I use pods. I love pods in concept. And we'll talk about why it's not actually loving pods in a little while. But for those of you that may not know what pods are, the idea of pods is the file structure that is prescribed by Ember CLI and before that Ember AppKit is very much in tune and in line with the original Rails file structure. So it was like in Ember landed like app/routes/some route name.js, or if you have folders like nested routes like post/comments route, it would be app routes post comments .js. And then to go to that routes template, you then have to go back up 2 directories and down into templates and then the same name again, and that is quite annoying. That drives me bonkers. So the idea of pods back in late 2013 was to sort of fix that problem and allow the things to be located locally where together, like the two or 3 files that are related to each other to be in the same location. That's the thing that I love. I'm not in love with the current implementation. So let's go to the original blog post to describe what pods is. So it says blah 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 Rails directory structure yada yada. We discussed moving this layout somewhere else. Proposed directory structure is still up for discussion. That makes it clear for everyone, right? All right, all done. Bye bye. I'm done. You guys understand now. So having not been involved in any of those discussions, not talking to any core team members, at the time I was only doing Ember for about 4 months, I decided to try to implement pods. From this description, from this, I decided, oh, I understand this. How hard can it be? So what I did was an interpretation. We'll call it like freestyle dance of the original idea, and I got a lot wrong. I was both new to architecting these kinds of things, and I didn't know what the hell they were thinking when they said what they said. So we have some issues. But the core, I'm going to use version numbers that aren't actual version numbers. It's just what I call them in my head, like as milestones of the project. As far as I know, it's like all 0.0.7, 0.0.6, whatever. But the idea with original, like the first cut of pods was to take the name of a thing and its type, which before this, where the file structure was, aside from app, it was the type of the thing, a slash, and then the name of the thing, dot whatever extension, like .js or .hbs, depending on what it was. So the idea of pods, the way I understood from that little image, was to flip that on its head, to make the type of the thing come at the end. So that way you could have the folder structure include both the handlebars and the route file, or the controller and the route file, that kind of stuff. The initial implementation was both very messy and very simple, making a massive amount of assumptions and had a lot of bugs. So, but let's look a little bit about, I'm going to show some file layouts with this structure, but this is the route setup that we're going to be roughly talking about, just to have some semblance of knowing, kind of having a mental picture. So we have a post route, some comments under it, and then to show an individual comments. Obviously, this is an incomplete app. You'd need a list of posts. You'd have to have a post. I should have put a path for a post ID, but whatever. You get the point. Is there's routes and they're nested, and you have the structure that you have to deal with. Okay, so given this structure, what are all the files that you might be using? So in pods v1, you'd have, also, I hate using the subdirectory of pods. It's the worst thing ever. Don't do that. It's literally just adding an arbitrary extra level of depth for no value. So don't do that. But anyway, so all of these examples don't use that. But just if they did, just sub app slash with app slash pod slash, and then feel bad about yourself. So the idea here is like you have an application route and template, and they're together in the same directory. Then you have an index route and template, and they're together. Post route and template, so on and so on. More files. Post slash index slash route. This is all like prescribed by that initial cut. And by and large, this doesn't change that much the whole duration, even to what's on master today. Okay, so then you have, once you start getting into the nesting, now you have post slash index slash route, or post slash comment slash route, and then post comments index. And it all feels okay, right? There's not extra directories, not really. And there might be if you only had one route file and not both a route and a template. That could be true. But mostly it seems reasonable. And that's what I thought. Now when we get to the models and adapters and serializers, this is where it starts to fall apart. Mostly because at the time I didn't use Ember data. I didn't use any of these things. So I'm like, this, whatever, it seems fine. It's just the rule is simple. It's the type flipped with the name. That's easy. So this would be what that might look like. If you wanted to have a local lookup of a pod, let's say you are in the posts route template, like so that would be, in this case, it'd be app post slash template.hbs, and you wanted to have just a display post component, not as a general use component, but just a nice way to gather code. You might invoke it like this. Now, of course, this only worked after Ember 1.9, which was when we could have nested subdirectories for handlebars invocations. Also, as a side note, you will not be able to have nested directory structure for angle bracket components in the future, and we'll get to the solution for that shortly. But the idea here is, okay, if I just have this component, I want to keep it co-located with post stuff, and we'll call it display post. And go to town. So it goes in the same directory. If you remember, the post template was in the same directory. And we'd call it app post, display post component, and template. So this is all straightforward. It's slightly annoying that I have to say posts again here. Because what if I change the name of that directory? What if I change the name of that route? And it's still the same template structure. It's still all the same stuff. But now this component is broken, or this template is completely broken. That's very annoying. That's one of the downfalls. So conversely, if I didn't want this to be local and I wanted it to be global, then I would remove the post prefix, and now it would look in a different location. So it would be just looking in app slash display post. This is probably, like, you all know this. This is stuff you do all the time. This is not rocket science. OK, so the next iteration of pods didn't change a lot externally. But it made the code base massively easier to understand. There wasn't nested craziness going on. It's essentially a single array of functions that return a potential module path, and if there's a module at that location, that's what gets used. And here's a little example. So if you had module name lookup patterns here, you just would have a custom resolver that would implement this. The whole thing wouldn't fit on the slide, but whatever. So you'd have like resolver.extend, and you'd implement this method. Grab the parent set of array items, and you can push, or you could unshift. You could add a thing to the beginning or the end, depending on whether you wanted your new Snowflake modules to take precedence over the built-in ones, or to be found as a fallback, whatever. And then Snowflake modules, all it has to do is return. It gets passed in this like parse to name object, which has like a type, a full name without type, a few other fields. Also, that is not valid syntax. Fields. This shouldn't be here, but anyway, so you just return a string, and if this string happens to be a module the system knows about, it would use that module. And that was it. That's as simple as it is. So this made it so that if my really naive initial implementation wasn't good enough for you, you could like do absolutely anything you want it to do. You would add a new function, you would look up your thing, you could replace the existing built-in set and completely replace it and have like 100% unique resolving. And it was very, very trivial. Yes?
Where would one of these live?
So what you do, oftentimes, in an Ember CLI app, you have app/app.js. By default, there's no file for the resolver. So by default, we import the resolver in that file and just add it to, you say, ember.application.extend, and we specify the resolver. What I often would do if I had to customize this, I would make a separate app/resolver file and add to import that there and then do this work in that. Though it could be absolutely done in app.js, just whatever floats your boat. But I like to keep the separate sort of classes in separate files, personally. Yeah, OK, so this is great. I think, I think this really hit the nail on the head as far as making it possible to extend and change and modify and tweak what was set up and what you could use. And I think that's great. Unfortunately, it also made what pods meant like completely different between two groups of people, right? Is pods a specific thing? Is pods a concept? Is pods a just the ability to completely override the default lookup paths? It messed a lot of that stuff up. I don't know what that means, but anyways, so I don't know what it cut off here. Sorry about that. It's probably pods v15 local invocation. So this didn't really change, or no, this is custom invocation, sorry. So this didn't really change a lot. You still invoke it the same, but now it's additionally, in addition to the places I showed before, it's also going to look at app snowflake, post whatever, blah, blah, blah. Because we said add snowflake and then the name without the type /type. So that's what it's going to do. And again, the way I did this, it's adding it to the end of the array. So it would come last. So if one of the other things matched, it would find those first, and then this would be the last thing. Does that make sense generally? How many of y'all have done that? Have had a custom resolver where you've overridden module name lookup patterns? Thank God. OK. I'm glad that you can, but I'm glad that you didn't. OK, so and oh, did I have the time? When did I do that? Oh, so I did this in April of 2014, and then the next sort of relatively major change was in July. So a few months later, it started to be obvious that this is very painful. Like, I don't want my route local pods, like components, for example, to be in the same folder as my route itself. So we made it possible. We added an additional lookup pattern to look for anything that might be a component in app components name of thing type. So this allows slightly different lookup patterns. So given the same invocation, you now can put it also in app/component/post instead of just app post display post. This sort of lets you have the components grouped together and the routes and templates and things that go with that grouped together. But it brings us right back to the problem of like, oh, I got to go up 2 directories and then down the depth again, and that part is very annoying. But the thing that it's trying to solve is it's trying to solve the problem of things being co-located together, just all jumbled in the same folder that aren't really directly related, that don't really belong, like something felt wrong with the way that it was before. So we're trying to fix it. We're trying to iterate and make things better. Global invocation is basically the same. It's just now you can put in app components display post. I think this is the same as the very first version global lookup, but I'd have to look. Actually, no, it's not, because it would be app display post component in version 1. So now you can put your global components in a subcomponents directory. And this feels a lot better for the global side, like a lot better than just app/display post. But you could have always done the JavaScript portion in app components, and you could have done the template component in app templates. But then you're right back to the Rails style where everything is jumbled up in different folders. So it's sort of annoying. OK, so now let's talk about what's wrong. I've sort of peppered some of this stuff through the talk so far. And hopefully I haven't bored everyone. We're almost there, I promise. So the first problem that is very obvious is that the rules are inconsistent. While from a purist sense, I can say it's very simple. The name and the type are flip-flopped. That's it. It's very simple. It's very consistent. unfortunately, what that means is the way you structure your files on in your directory are inconsistent, right? Like you have routes right next to components or models in the same folder as your route, and that feels weird. Like adapters and serializers, they all end up in the same place if you follow pods for everything. And that seems odd. I personally want my data stuff in one place, and I want my UI stuff in a different place. And potentially, I might even want to chunk up the UI stuff into either add-ons or engines or something like that and have stuff separate. Another problem was that they're not portable. There's no way to grab one directory structure and just cut it and move it over 3 directories or something and put it back down and it just work. It would not happen, wouldn't work. And that's because the directories, as you went down the depth, were very different from each other. And the invocation would have to change. For example, in the case of the local lookup for display post, you'd have to say posts/display post. So if it was no longer nested in the post route, now you've got to change that prefix. All your templates are changing. That's both very annoying and also pretty hostile to the concept of engines, which would basically be mount this thing at any location and it doesn't matter. If that's true, if that's possible, then obviously we can't hard code the root path of where the thing is. So that's annoying. There's too much variation. It was way too easy to do whatever you wanted and put anything you want anywhere. And I think that's actually a good thing. It's good to have an escape hatch. It's good to have the ability to put something where you want it or to custom match a given name to put it in a different location. Maybe you have nested projects or something and you want to match like a couple of directories up or a different base namespace. I think it's good to have that possibility, but it's not good for that to be like the main way that you customize the thing. Because we need to be able to write tooling. We need Ember CLI's generators to be able to say, let's put this thing in the right place. And when you can customize it like crazy, that's not possible, right? The structure, every structure of every project could be different. And that's absolutely not the thing we want. We want you to be able to you're an Ember developer, we want you to sit down an Ember app and be able to know easily where things are at. Not have to guess how a given thing is found, how a model is looked up, or where this thing's come from. So and I mentioned already the melding of UI and data. It basically co-locating things is quite annoying and confusing to find. Even like searching with something like a fuzzy file finder in your editor becomes annoying. So we didn't talk about this yet, but essentially with the original structure, you can have naming conflicts between components and routes. So if you happen to have a route that was display post, I don't know why you would, but if you did, it wouldn't work. Or one of the two wouldn't work. So I'd have to sit here and think about it for a minute to figure out which one wins, but it would not be a happy time. Or rather, maybe both things would use the same template, which would also be bananas. So that's not good. So there's naming conflicts. What about add-ons? So when this was developed, add-ons were not a thing. Like they weren't even thought of. Well, maybe they were thought of, but they didn't exist. There was no concept of add-ons. There was no idea that add-ons would be like they are today, where essentially like you're grabbing reusable snippets of code all over the place and you're pulling in add-ons. Today's add-ons emit components that go directly in your app folder, essentially masquerading as if they came from your app, which makes debugging very hard. Like, where did foo-bar come from? It's not in my project. What add-on of the 50 that are installed and nested of other add-ons did it come from? It's not clear. You basically end up like grepping your node modules folder to find out where it is, or at least that's what I do. Use like find and grep. So that's all completely missing. And not there. Okay, so where do we go? How can we solve these problems? I think the answer is yes. We spent a lot of time. We spent a few months and like half of a face-to-face meeting where we got together and all the core team members sort of like locked ourselves in the room and tried to figure out and hammer out a final sort of proposal for what pods meant. Because another part of this that's not on this list was pods. What did it mean? Like, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's like saying virtual DOM. It means nothing. And it means everything to other people, right? It has no actual meaning. And that's a problem. So we need to define what exactly it means, and then we need to make that a thing and get it rolled out as quickly as possible, get the tooling updated, because part of the problem here is that tooling is not fully implemented. Like, there's no easy way to podify an app or unpodify an app. You have to basically just rewrite all your files, which is very annoying. And the reason tooling can't work is because there's so much variant. Like, what's your pod module prefix? You use pods? I don't use anything. If you use pods, you should feel bad, but whole other story. OK, so where do we go from here? So pods v2. Now, this is vaporware. We're into the vaporware section, but I'm telling you what I'm going to implement soon. You will not get me to put a date on this. I am done with dates and releases. So the requirements are relatively straightforward. It's sort of the opposite of the other slide, the opposite of the problem slide. We need consistent rules. We need things to be mostly portable in most cases. And we need the data and the UI to be basically separated. Same example set up. Here's the file structure. The file structure feels sort of similar, only the types are still in the beginning and at the end in this case. So app routes application / route. When you start getting to additional levels of nesting, you'll see you've got app posts. This is wrong, but it should be like this line. Sorry about that. It's app routes, posts, routes, comments. So every layer is essentially the same as the layer above it with the structure. So every layer could have routes, or they could have components, or they could have helpers, all that kind of stuff. Models are similar, only they're in the models folder. So even though, like, basically all the stuff that goes with the post model go together. So the UI stuff goes in app routes. The model stuff, the data stuff, goes in app models. I don't personally care a ton about using the word models or data, but this is what we went with, and that seems fine. I don't care. We can arm wrestle about it later. So this is where we start getting cool, and this is going to take some changes in Ember, but I think it's very valuable. So in sort of the future, we are going to want to invoke local components, local to this route, without prefixing, without doing it manually. We don't want, so notice this is the global invocation, and this is the local invocation. There's no difference in invocation. And what that means is, based on what template you're in, if you say display post, it's going to look for, I'm in post route, it's going to look for components display post, or it'll fall back to the global path and find components display post. It will not traverse every directory up. It's not like a full recursive lookup path. It's just two levels, local and global. And frankly, what we found is there's really only two kinds of components. Well, there's two main kinds of components in the concept of this talk. The one is, it's very specific for this route only. It's not a component that was built for easy reuse. It's a component that was built to abstract things, to make the template simpler, to make the logic have a place to go. And it's not a thing like display post isn't a thing you're going to put in the comments route. You're going to put it in the post route. It's not a shared concept in general, in this example. Now, if it were, you have a place to put that. You could put it in the global area. And that would be just app components. This is exactly the same as the path that we use today. This global path does not change. Data is also very similar, only in this case we have two choices. We can either have, if we have a single file, we can use app models post.js, or if we have, as soon as you add a second file, it'll go in the subfolder. Now, I don't believe we're going to force a refactor at that point, because that's pretty annoying. It'll just be a thing where you can't, clearly you can't have two modules with the same name in the same directory. So you can't have a post.js that's both a serializer and a model. That doesn't make any sense. So you'll be forced to make a folder. And at some point, if you want to move the model into the same folder, that's fine. Or if you use the generator, most likely, we'll probably just auto-generate all three things for you, so you don't have to do it manually. But that's sort of to be determined, the generator part. Will we generate this by default or this? I think the question is mostly, how often do you have to override the serializer in your adapter? If you generally don't, then having a single file makes more sense than having a folder with three that you don't use. So that's a question for another day. So let's break apart this individual level of UI. So every level under app routes can have any of these things in it. Today it's controller. In the future it'll be component, which will be the routable component, and everything will be hunky-dory. But you can have components, you can have helpers, you can have other routes, and these can be nested. So if you had a local helper, just like you have a local component, it would look up in that local route. And the invocation would not require a prefix. Now remember at the very beginning of the talk I said angle bracket components will not allow invocation with a slash. This is why it doesn't matter. This is why it's not a big deal. Because you'll be able to use local to that route's or that template's components without real problem. So if you're reaching up and over 3 directories, then you're really talking about a global thing anyways, and you don't need a slash. The vast majority of cases where you have nested component structure is either to group things to make it simpler, or, which this does, or because they're actually shared and you really want them in 2 places. So both of those use cases should be solved and handled by this structure. The other thing that's nice is that every level of nesting is exactly this structure. So you can theoretically, and because the local lookup doesn't have to change in the template, you should be able to cut the folder, put it in a different place, and invoke it exactly the same. Now, if you're doing unit tests, if you're importing the actual class, those import paths may change. Like, it's not magic here, but the idea is, generally speaking, the app should continue to work. You should be able to move the things, change your route name, and move things around. So this is where we start getting into like really neat territory. You'll be able to invoke add-on components directly. So prefix with double colon. So you have, like, say, Ember admin in this case is an add-on, and you would say, I want the model title component from Ember admin, and pass it some params. It's going to look inside node modules Ember admin. I just put that there. It's going to use npm's resolution, so it may be some nested directory structure further, but that's the idea. And it's going to grab it directly from the add-on structure, the add-on folder, instead of requiring everyone to re-export everything in the add folder. Yes?
In terms of angle bracket components, how do you see that?
It would look exactly like this, only with angles instead of curlies.
But still with the colon?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. We're already in make shit up land, so might as well stay there. So the idea is, so we need a way to reference that thing. Colon is an invalid, like that's an invalid tag name, which makes it okay for us to use, basically. Because you can't use that today, it can't conflict with a thing you can already do. So the idea here is that you don't re-export all your components. You don't have to worry about like having your add-on, your components in add-on folder and then re-exporting an app. You don't have to worry about getting an error about some random thing in your app directory that's not from your app. That is very hard to debug. So all that stuff goes away. The other thing that's nice about this is because with angle brackets you can't use directories, you can't use subdirectories, that means you can only access the top level exposed things from this add-on. So now this add-on has the ability to have private components. It can have, in its model title, it can have local lookups inside of it that you can't hit from the outside. And I think that's great. It lets the add-on have encapsulation. It lets it not have to worry about exposing the world, its entire world as public API. It lets itself have helpers or additional local things that may not make sense outside, but make it have the ability to structure itself much better. The other factor is, and we didn't really talk a lot about the helpers side, but with helpers today, since helpers don't require a dash anymore and they're automatic, they don't need to be manually registered, you can easily have helpers that conflict with actual property names in your system. And if you do, the helper's going to win, and that's very confusing to most people. So if you have a title helper and you then happen to have a title property, you're invoking the helper when you call curly title, not the property, which is actually kind of bananas, but that's the way the rules are. We could potentially fix that, but we'd have to figure out how to not break everyone's apps that may rely on it. One person sees a bug, another person sees a feature, yada yada. So the idea is the concepts are straightforward. The layers are all symmetrical. They're basically, the idea is they're roughly fractals of each other. And you don't have to worry about it. There's local lookup, and there's direct support for add-ons. So you don't have a lot of the weird jumping through hoops that we have right today with re-exports. That's it. Questions?
This is trivial compared to what happen to you that when you're working with several components and you're using this pod structure, you end up with 4 tabs in your editor that say component.js?
So yes, I don't know if did I mention this? I intended to mention this. Yes, I did. I just forgot to talk about it. So near at the bottom, where those of you in the back can't see, just like I mentioned with the module structure, if you have the data files, if you only have a single one of a given thing, you can use the name. So you might use data display post in this case, .js instead of a folder and then a component.js file. This gives an out for that. So if in the case that you don't need both the template and a JavaScript file, you don't have another file named template.hbs or another file named component.js. Now, that is the politically correct answer. And I will also tell you the non-politically correct answer, and the answer is that you should fix your editor to not be dumb. It should be displaying the name of it should disambiguate that for you, right? Now, we need to get way better about giving proper integrations for editors, and we've talked a lot about that as well. So, having an Atom plugin or having a Sublime plugin, Emacs and Vim already basically do this, the right thing if you have them configured. But it should be just drop in simple to do. But I ultimately consider that to be an editor failure, not a pod's failure. Not to point fingers. Sir.
So does this mean that I can finally get an application-wide loading template that would be a global thing that will be looked up properly?
Maybe? So the question is, can you get an application-wide loading template that's looked up properly? I think that the problems with that are more than just pods. So the issues that I have seen with loading templates, and maybe your experience is different, but the issues are mostly that it's just not very well documented and explained. And also, the Ember CLI integration has only come very recently. So prior to maybe 1.12 or 1.13, you just couldn't have loading subroutes. It just didn't work in Ember CLI at all. So it just depends. I know that's not a very good answer, but I don't have a quick answer. So you should be able to do that today. You should. It should be possible. I'm not saying it is. It just should. It's a bug if it doesn't. Well, we can figure out. I don't know. Give me a demo repo and we can open an issue on. Well, we can figure out if it's either Ember CLI or Ember. Yeah, it's fine. It's good. But it should be able to work. I have a couple of. So I have a whole grab bag of Ember examples. One of which is an Ember twiddle that shows using application loading routes and subroutes, basically loading and error substates. So maybe we can look at that and see if it's a folder naming structure issue. Another problem we have with the loading substates is that we hard code to use an underscore, which doesn't play very well with Ember CLI. So Ember CLI wants everything to be dasherized, so it'd be application dash loading, but Ember internally is looking for application underscore loading in some cases. So that's unfortunately not good together. So anybody else? All right, I guess that's it. Thank you guys for having me.